Trinidad Chambliss is the top quarterback in the Southeastern Conference. We've been saying it all along. Now another major SEC podcaster, well, he's agreeing with me.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. That's because of fans like you taking in content like this, and we will always be thankful for that. On today's show, we're breaking down the top position battles heading into spring practice for an Ole Miss team that has a chance to be extremely talented. The difference between an 11-1 season and a 9-3 finish could very well come down to two critical spots on the roster. We'll start at linebacker, where Ole Miss has plenty of talent but needs consistency. With a retooled room, this is a group worth watching closely over the next couple of months. Next, we're going to turn our attention to the offensive tackle position and ask the big question, did Ole Miss do enough? And make no mistake, having Trinidad Chambliss under center or behind center certainly makes life easier. But first, we're going to discuss that SEC podcast naming Trinidad Chambliss the top SEC quarterback heading into spring, a recognition that feels like less of a surprise and more like the beginning of a trend. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is your team every single day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, but putting in the work, well, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to Mazda because there's more to you. All right, so Trinidad Chambliss getting his eligibility has caused the national media and the people in the media spheres to scramble. And the first thing is to go off of their original take that they had back in the way too early time when Ole Miss had a number 12 rated quarterback in the SEC, and they're going to finish in the lower 20s. And this Ole Miss team is not talented enough to replicate what they just did. All of that is an indictment kind of on Deuce Knight, according to them, but I digress about that. We'll talk about that in a later day. Trinidad Chambliss getting his eligibility has forced the national pundits to kind of rethink their narratives. And in their narratives, it's coming out that Ole Miss has the top quarterback in the country potentially. They have the top running back in the country potentially. They have the top scorers, the top two scorers in the Southeastern Conference returning. And we have them down really low, and now Trinidad's coming back, and I don't know how to deal with that. And you're going to see a trend over the next couple of months of Ole Miss going from around 20 to inside the top 10, because this is easily a top 10 level talent. If you don't put them in the top 10 by the time this is all said and done, it's kind of an indictment on you at this point. So that SEC podcast, which they are really good about lists, especially ranking the 16 teams in the SEC and getting engagements off of that. They do a fantastic job. They put out their 1.0 SEC quarterback ranking for 2026, and sure enough, Trinidad Chambliss was right there on top. Trinidad Chambliss is going into this season as literally a Heisman favorite. We talked about yesterday's show. He's popping up on the top 3 of call sheet list. The sports books have not begun to correct for this yet. By the time March and April gets here, you will see the sports books start to correct that as well. But this is just an example of an early adoption of Trinidad Chambliss being the top quarterback in the SEC. And it's an interesting ranking that he had. For those watching on video right now, all 16 players are there. Number 2 is Lenora Sellers. And everybody's going to say, really, we're doing that again? Remember, Kendall Briles is now the offensive coordinator for South Carolina. And we all remember what Kendall Briles did with KJ Jefferson at Arkansas. Lenore Sellers was built in a lab for that offense. You're going to see a ton of quarterback powers and all of that. Lenore Sellers is going to be a really good quarterback, and I'm glad that Ole Miss does not play South Carolina this year. Number 3 is Gunnar Stockton. We all saw the Sugar Bowl. He earned a ton of our respect because he just got bullied and beat up by the Ole Miss defense, but he kept coming, kept making play after play after play. A really good game by Gunnar Stockton, just not quite enough to handle the juggernaut that was Ole Miss in the second half of that game. Number 4 is Byram Brown, the transfer from USF, going to Auburn with his coach. He's going to be running a system that he was very good in at USF. At Auburn, I will be interested to see exactly where the Tigers fare. Can they get over that 6-win hump, which they have not been able to do since the beginning of the decade? A healthy John Mateer is number 5 at Oklahoma. Arch Manning is number 6. That's kind of an appropriate ranking. I think Arch Manning could be very good, but that's actually a kind of heady ranking. Number 7 is Sam Levitt, and I don't necessarily agree with that ranking. He threw for 80 yards against Mississippi State, and his good year, what made him famous, was with Cam Scatteraboo at running back. Without Scatteraboo, he was kind of, mid. So, good for Sam Levitt for getting paid, but I don't know if I'd put him at 7, especially not over Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed going to put up numbers in the SEC next year. LSU still doesn't know how to stop a running quarterback, and Marcel Reed can run the ball. Number 9 is Joey Aguiar from Tennessee. We're still waiting on the eligibility hearing on that. By the time you listen to this, it could be out, but by the time I recorded it, it wasn't. It didn't sound promising for Aguiar in that setting in court. Number 10 is Kamario Taylor, unbelievably running athlete. He scored 2 long touchdowns against the Ole Miss Rebels. Super great runner, not a good passer, which makes me question why he's 10 and Austin Simmons is number 11. He transferred from Ole Miss to Missouri. Austin Simmons has nearly a 400-yard passing game on his resume already. Austin Simmons should be higher than this, and it should be at least ahead of Kamario Taylor. Austin Mack, I don't know. I would almost put Keelan Russell. I think Keelan Russell is going to be the quarterback there. I do not know much about KJ Jackson. Aaron Philo's just kind of been a dude at Georgia Tech. Now he's going to have to be the dude at Florida. Kenny Minchie was committed to Nebraska. Kentucky got him to flip. They had a big year in the transfer portal. I expect Minchie to be higher up than number 15 on the list. And number 16 is a true freshman. An extremely talented true freshman, but a true freshman just the same, in Jared Curtis, the player out of Nashville, Tennessee. The cool thing about Jared Curtis is I think this is the first top 100 player that Vanderbilt has signed, period. And if you want to look at Diego Pavia being Mario before he ate the mushroom and Jared Curtis being Mario after he ate the mushroom, there would be a little bit of truth there. There's some really good players. But the point is, this list right here, I don't agree with every one of them. I would move some players up and down. But the overall thing, I don't have necessarily a problem with that. And I certainly agree with Trinidad Chambliss being the number 1 player, especially after the run he had in the playoffs a year ago. Trinidad Chambliss is a really good quarterback with a lot of ability to still get better. He has not hit his ceiling yet. To put this in perspective for everybody who's watching, Trinidad Chambliss played last year with a retrofitted Austin Simmons offense. The offense was designed for Austin Simmons for 4.5 months. And then after the Kentucky game, it's, hey, we got to retrofit this as soon as possible. By the end of the year, they kind of figured out what he did really well. I am impressed with John David Baker, who was on the staff during the playoff and participating in practices and seeing what goes on, the talent of the players and what they do well and play calls that he does well. It's also important to remember that Ole Miss lost like 4 coaches. That's all. To LSU. They lost 4 players to LSU. So they retained most of their coaching staff and almost all of their roster in the coaching change from Lane Kiffin going down to Baton Rouge. This is an extremely talented Ole Miss team. And as more people do the research into this team, you're going to see the Rebels go up and up and up and up. I know that there's some people that want to kind of just like sit in the weeds, and I get that. 100% I get that. But this Ole Miss team is nearly as talented as that 2024 team. And the reason I say nearly and not more or not as talented is because we're not sure if Will Eccles can be Walter Nolan just yet. We're not sure if Blake Purchase can be Princely and Monmielen just yet. But that's the drop-off. That's it. And it's going to be pretty interesting to see. Now, let's turn our attention to spring football. This Ole Miss team, if they're truly a national championship-ready team, there are a couple of key position battles that we need to pay close attention to. We will talk about all of that next. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. Coach O is calling on Ole Miss fans to come out against Tennessee in a game that Ole Miss really needs to win tonight, especially after a blowout loss to the Kentucky Wildcats. Just Coach O getting Ole Miss to this point to where this week matters and is as big as it is. Game day is going to be at the Ole Miss South Carolina game on Sunday. That is really cool. And these type of things remind us what it takes to raise the bar, getting that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, that I never quit. We put the same passion into every model at Mazda. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events that you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years, and that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care most about, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. You know, the drama of curling matches that start really slow but somehow get really intense really quickly. Speed skating races that are decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off, even niche events that become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Hey, do us a favor, subscribe, like, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it keeps all of this free. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every single day. Now take it up a notch and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com or check the link that's down in the show notes below to learn more. Anybody that has already signed up, and there's a bunch of you, sign up for the Discord server. Even if you don't use Discord, there's not many trolls in there, but it functions like a chat. And we go back and forth. We drop news. We have Twitter links of Ole Miss addresses inside my personal Discord server. So if you join this, I will send you an invite to that server so you can just immerse yourself in Ole Miss fandom. It's pretty cool indeed. So we'll see exactly how that goes. All right. So let's turn our attention to spring football. And spring football is about a month away. It's crazy to think about, but it's about a month away. And with Ole Miss being at this point a national championship contender, because I'm not going to beat around the bush. They have the talent to win the games. Now, they still have to win the games. They still have to do what's necessary. But looking at this team on paper, this isn't like in 1986 when you were hoping to get to an Independence Bowl. This isn't even like 1991 whenever you ended up in the Gator Bowl. This isn't like any team that Eli had. This isn't like any team that Houston Nutt or Hugh Freeze had. This isn't like any team other than 2024 that Lane Kiffin had. When you look at this roster on paper, you say, hey, these guys can win the national title. And that's true if Ole Miss hits on a couple of very key positions. This is important to realize. In the age of the transfer portal, there's much more volatility on players because you have a short recruitment. You bring them in. If they don't hit, you could be in a little bit of trouble. See the Ole Miss men's basketball team this year for an example of that. If you do not hit on your evals, you can sink really quickly. And that happens to everybody. But on paper, with the snaps and with everything going on, Ole Miss is exactly where they need to be. But the two positions that should be on everybody's mind if you want a national championship level team, offensive line and linebacker. That's what we're going to focus on. They did a good job in the transfer portal, shoring up the secondary. Whenever practice gets here, we're going to talk about all of that stuff. So don't worry about that. But this case, let's start off talking about tackles. Ole Miss lost Jaden Williams, who should have been invited to the NFL Combine, by the way, and Diego Pounds as tackles on the offensive line. That is their losses on the offensive line. They retained the interior of Patrick Kudas, Bryson Sanders, and Delano Townsend. When you look at the offensive line position, the players that are going to be competing for two tackle spots, I'm looking at 4 players right now. You have Connor Halls, who is going to be a redshirt freshman coming in. They were very high on him, just like they were Devin Harper. They literally talked about both players the same way. Almost lost Devin Harper to LSU. But you still have Connor Halls, and he is a tackle at heart. He's from Central Florida, Kissimmee. I think he played at Osceola High School. Really good player. Also, Ole Miss has another tackle returning that doesn't get any mention because it kind of fell between the cracks, and that is Cooper Johnson. He was a JUCO All-American out of Iowa that transferred in last August. He was one of those late transfers in that Ole Miss got. So he ended up redshirting as well, so getting ready to go. But he was an All-American in JUCO. There's more expectations than just a guy on the roster, okay? So those two players are the returners. Then Ole Miss got Carius Kern, the top-rated offensive line signing, top-rating transfer portal according to On3, signing that Ole Miss got. He was a top 25 player in the country. He has an extremely high ceiling. There's a chance that he is going to end up at tackle, but he could end up inside, and somebody like Patrick Kudas could end up as a tackle. Patrick Kudas was the Kent Hall offensive lineman of the year in the state of Mississippi this year. Another player that Ole Miss got is Tommy Kinsler, an offensive lineman that is fairly highly thought of on that Miami team a year ago. Now, he didn't play a whole bunch because their tackles, they're pretty good. Mario Cristobal offensive line, they don't play around that much. But Kinsler was expected to contribute quite a bit this season. So him transferring away, that hurt. We talked to the Florida football scout about him. He said he was shocked that Cristobal let him walk even a little bit. So if you look at the offensive line, the way we assume it's going to go is it's going to be Carius Kern at left tackle. At right tackle is going to be Tommy Kinsler. And then you have the interior offensive line not changing very much. But Connor Halls, but Cooper Johnson, they could throw a wrench in things, and we'll see exactly how that shakes out. And the people that are playing interior parts of the offensive line will be something to pay attention to as well. Good players. Ole Miss got the talent that they wanted, but you have to be able to hit. You have to be able to make the right choices. And Ole Miss traditionally, I give them credit, they have shown the ability to do that. But Tommy Kinsler is somebody that was brought in really late after Devin Harper skedaddled down to Baton Rouge. It felt like it could have been an emergency type signing. And my concern with that is what happened in the running back position after Quinshon Judkins left Ole Miss, and Ole Miss just signed 3 running backs, and surely one of them are going to be the guy, and none of them were the guy. So that is my concern about tackle. At least you have two guys that were here and know what's going on, that has been in the system, that are fairly highly thought of guys to kind of be there as the floor with Carius Kern and Tommy Kinsler coming around. So it should be pretty interesting to see what happens. All right. So Dabo made sure everybody heard Luke Ferrelli's name. Now we tell you why Ole Miss fans should pay attention to that. And with a new look linebacker room, the Rebels must nail their evals. See a common trend? That's all coming up next. You know, hiring isn't just about finding somebody willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business moving forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs, well, that's the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and yes, of course, location. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through the mismatches, and with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit for what you do. And here's a stat that kind of says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show will get $75 sponsored job credit to get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, so the other position that is going to be a major spring battle, and like I said, the good news is the talent's there. They just need to hit. Like the wide receiver position at Ole Miss, I'm not worried even though there's new players coming in there because Ole Miss has hit on wide receivers for 15 years. They're going to find guys that can play. I really like Jonte Cook. Deuce Alexander's really good. All of those guys. Tight end, I'm not necessarily worried about that. Running back, I'm not worried about that at all. Although I will say, we'll talk about this as spring training gets closer. Running back 2 through running back 7 is going to be a knife fight in spring training. It's going to be important that they get through because, you know, if you're JT Lindsey, this is kind of a big spring because you want to be high up on the list. Joshua Dye coming from FCS. Mekhi Frazier, that's the point. The secondary, they got high-level transfers to come in, including a Trey Amos level corner. So the position that I have left to look at would be the linebacker room. And everybody's going to say, well, you know, Luke Ferrelli and all those guys, they're really good players. And that is absolutely factually correct. I'm not going to doubt that at all. Now, players returning to Ole Miss, Jarcoby Hobson is somebody that I expect to at least challenge for playing time. Other than that, it's 3 transfers that I'm looking at. First of all, you got Luke Ferrelli. Really good player. All of that. And you all know the story of Luke Ferrelli. He was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year out of Cal. He transferred to Clemson, then immediately flipped his commitment to Ole Miss. Kind of similar, if you want to think about it, to what Andrew Jones did a year ago when he committed to South Carolina out of Grambling and then flipped his commitment to Ole Miss. Really good player, sideline to sideline. He's kind of twitchy. He plays the game right. He was coached really well under Justin Wilcox at Cal. You don't really have doubts of him being able to pick up the system of what's going on. The concern that you have for him, he hasn't played but about a year of football. So I know it's not much of a jump going from the ACC level to the SEC level, but it is a jump. So you have worries about what it could look like moving forward. You know, another player is Keaton Thomas, the linebacker that came to Ole Miss out of Baylor. He is the Andrew Jones type, the Chris Paul type, that is an athletic that can just go sideline to sideline, and he's a very sudden player. And then you have Tahj Butler, who transferred to Ole Miss from Georgia Tech, and he's just a tackling machine. So you add all four of those together, you have a two deep pretty much ready-made. Now you have other players that are going to commit, but that is the upper crust of what is going on. When you look on the outside, you know, you have Blake Purchase, who is going to be a jack. And the reason I point that out is like Suntaran Perkins is listed as a linebacker from time to time, because whether they run odd or even fronts kind of changes what the players do. But the hybrid player, it would be like a Blake Purchase. It'll be interesting to see. Jordan Renaud, somebody else, 6'3.5", 240 pounds. He's another jack type edge player. So the linebacker positions in spring, it's going to be very important so that a pecking order is established. So the green dot is found. The organizer of the defense is in Baton Rouge now. He might not have been a superstar player. He was a good player. He might not have been a superstar player, but he was the green dot responsible for lining everybody up on the field. You have to find that guy, and spring is where they're going to start doing that. You'll see that whoever gets a grasp of this defense, who is in the playbook right now, who is ready for taking the written word and translating it to on-field production, that happens in spring football. Is it going to be Luke Ferrelli? Is he talented enough to be worthy of all the headache that was caused by Dabo Swinney? I think he is, but he has to perform. Just like the men's basketball team, these transfers can, on paper, be exactly what you expect, but the light just doesn't come on for them from time to time. We're going to talk about the transfers. Corey Burton's going to be putting stuff on the All Access channel. Mike Huseman's going to be talking about some stuff as well. We'll see. Dalen Flowers reporting from on the ground with what's going on, and we can kind of make that work. So it should be pretty interesting to see how it shakes out. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, where we'll continue to talk football, the transfer portal, spring football, all of that. So make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you'll get all of the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels, so check that out as well. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer channel is built for you. Get Locked On Ole Miss ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonolemmiss.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we're going to send you on over to the National Locked On 24/7 podcast channel on YouTube. And on audio, make sure you check out a second listen, either Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC. That is the way to go. Listen, spring football is about a month away, so everybody needs to get ready for the rush that is going to come. It is going to be Pete Golding's first spring, and we're going to get to know some of these coaches over the course of this spring, and I'm excited for that. Anyway, until tomorrow, hotty toddy, everybody.